The night was silent except for the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull. It was June 17th, 1996, just after midnight, off the coast of Clearwater, Florida. A small private yacht named La Estrella Azul drifted lazily under the moonlight. Its owner, Miguel El Toro Vargas, a mid-level cartel boss from Sinaloa, was celebrating his birthday with 3 guests and 2 bodyguards. None of them noticed the faint hum of an approaching outboard motor a few hundred meters away. 2 silhouettes, dressed in black wetsuits, glided over the water like shadows. Their boat had no lights, no license plates, and their faces were hidden behind masks. The men, Jason Cole and Mark Reeves, were local fishermen turned opportunists. They had heard rumors for months that Vargas smuggled cash shipments through small coastal rendezvous points to avoid the DEA's aerial surveillance. They knew this night would be their only chance. Jason killed the motor and let the tide do the rest. They drifted close enough to hear laughter from the yacht. He checked his watch, 12:47 a.m. Mark reached into the bag and handed Jason a grappling hook. The line caught the rail soundlessly. Within minutes, they were on deck, moving low and fast. A guard snored in a folding chair near the stern. Jason's hand trembled slightly as he raised the silenced pistol, but Mark's steady hand on his shoulder grounded him. 2 muffled pops later, the man slumped forward. Inside the cabin, soft Latin music played, mingling with the clinking of glasses. Jason pushed open the door, just as Vargas turned, startled. The flash of recognition crossed his face for a split second before Mark shouted, "On the floor! Nobody moves!" The guests screamed. One tried to reach for a drawer. Mark's bullet ended the motion. In less than 2 minutes, it was over. Jason grabbed the duffel bag under the table, stacks of bundled hundreds inside, still wrapped with red banking tape. $3 million. They cut the yacht's communication wires, smashed the radio, and vanished into the darkness before the Coast Guard was even alerted. For 3 days, the bodies drifted unnoticed until a fisherman found them 20 miles offshore. By then, Jason and Mark were gone, their faces already changed by the shadow of fear. The Clearwater Bay heist, as it would later be called, sent shockwaves through the underworld. Cartel associates flew in from Mexico to investigate. The FBI took over jurisdiction, suspecting a professional hit. But there were no fingerprints, no witnesses, and no leads. Just a bloodied yacht and $3 missing million. The only evidence left behind was a torn piece of wet fabric caught in the railing. A scrap from a wetsuit with a faded tag reading Oceania Dive Company, Tampa. It seemed useless at the time. 10 years passed. The case went cold, locked away in federal archives under unsolved maritime robbery. Yet for Jason Cole, the money was both salvation and curse. He had fled to Nevada, opened a small auto repair shop under a fake name, and kept his share buried behind his property in metal containers. Mark Reeves had gone north, to Portland, buying a rundown motel under a shell company. They rarely spoke after the split. Jason had nightmares, water, blood, and the flash of Vargas's eyes before the gunfire. Sometimes he woke up hearing waves where there were none. In 2006, a storm unearthed more than sand along the Florida coast. A group of local divers found rusted debris washed up near Clearwater, the stern plate of La Estrella Azul. Among it, an old waterproof container surfaced. Inside, there was a logbook partially damaged by salt. But one entry stood out. June 16th, 1996, delivery confirmed. 3M cash on board. To depart after midnight. Cargo secure. The note reignited the file. Detective Harold Shaw, now retired but haunted by unsolved cases, received a call from a young federal agent, Lisa Grant. "You worked this case, didn't you?" she asked. "I did. It never left me," Shaw replied. Grant wanted to reopen it as part of a cold case review project using modern data matching, DNA, digital forensics, purchase history tracking. She showed him a scanned image of that torn wetsuit tag. "Back then, they didn't run manufacturer logs," she said. "Now we can." Within days, they traced the batch to a single shipment of 10 wetsuits sold to Oceania Dive Company in early 1996. Most were purchased in cash, except 2 bought with a credit card belonging to a Jason Cole. Shaw felt his chest tighten. That's our ghost. Meanwhile, in Nevada, Jason was aging poorly. His hands shook from years of guilt and alcohol. He'd kept his past buried, literally. But when two men showed up at his garage asking odd questions about old marine supplies, his instinct screamed. He called Mark that night. "We're burned," he said. "Someone's digging." Mark's voice was calm, too calm. "Then maybe it's time to move the rest of it." Jason hesitated. He hadn't told Mark that half his share was gone, used up on debts and failed ventures. "We should just disappear," Jason said. But Mark had other plans. 2 days later, Jason found his front door open. The safe where he'd kept the last $200,000 was empty. Only a note remained. "You should have trusted me." And panic set in. Jason started drinking heavily. He began calling the old detective anonymously, pretending to be a concerned citizen. But Shaw recognized the nervous tremor in his voice. He'd heard it before, from witnesses trying to confess without confessing. "If you want to clear your conscience," Shaw told him quietly, "come clean before someone else does it for you." That same week, Mark's motel caught fire under suspicious circumstances. Witnesses saw two figures leaving the scene, one limping. Firefighters found a burnt suitcase of cash under the floorboards. Among the ashes, they recovered a half-melted silver lighter engraved with initials JC. Federal agents suspected internal betrayal. The case reopened publicly in 2007, sparking media attention. $3 million lost at sea. New evidence in Cartel yacht massacre. Journalists swarmed the coastal towns again, dredging up rumors and fear. One local diver, an older man named Carl Benton, claimed he'd found something weeks before the FBI did, a waterproof film canister among coral. "I didn't say anything," he told a reporter, "because I knew what it meant." Inside were 5 blurred photos. Vargas, smiling with a cigar, and 2 masked men hauling duffels. One photo, though faint, captured a reflection in the yacht's window. A sliver of Jason's face, half-covered, unmistakable to anyone who knew him. Shaw and Grant studied that photo for hours. "That's him," Shaw said quietly. "Cole, how do we find him?" Grant asked. "We don't. We wait for him to find us." Jason's guilt became unbearable. He began recording cassette tapes, confessions mixed with paranoia. Archive, audio tape number 3. "If anyone finds this, I didn't mean to kill anyone. It was supposed to be easy. Just take the money and leave." But they drew first. Mark said no one would get hurt. He lied. That tape would later be found buried near the old garage after his death. But at that moment, Jason was still alive, barely. One evening, he noticed a car idling near his workshop. No lights, no plots. His stomach turned. He called the FBI tip line from a payphone, voice trembling. "It's about the Clearwater thing," he said. "I can tell you everything. Just promise I'll be safe." The call disconnected halfway. The next morning, his garage was in flames. They found no body, only fragments of burned documents and melted tape reels. Locals whispered it was the cartel, finally tying loose ends. Others believed Mark had done it to silence him. But Agent Grant wasn't convinced. In one of the debris photos, she noticed something: the melted remains of a metal lunchbox, the kind children used in the 90s. Inside, under layers of soot, technicians found a heat-damaged but legible receipt from Oceania Dive Company, Tampa, dated June 12, 1996. Signature, Jason Cole. Grant stared at it for a long time. "He tried to tell us," she murmured. "He left it here. 10 years, $3 million, and a trail of dead men later. The water of Clearwater still shimmered under the same indifferent moon. Somewhere under layers of time and guilt, the truth waited to surface one last time. Because there was still one question no one could answer. If Jason and Mark were both dead, who spent the remaining money in Miami under Cole's name just a month ago? To be continued. If you want to know what they found next, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. 10 years after the flames in Nevada, the case had fallen silent again. Or so it seemed. In 2016, a data analyst working for the Financial Crimes Division in Miami noticed a series of unusual deposits, small, precise amounts spread across multiple offshore accounts that all traced back to an identity long thought dead. Jason Cole. The transactions were cautious, methodical, and timed around specific cartel-related wire patterns. Someone was moving money that had been missing since 1996. Agent Lisa Grant stared at the digital trail late one night in her cubicle. The office lights hummed, and the coffee on her desk had gone cold hours ago. "You're supposed to be dead," she whispered at the screen. The case file for the Clearwater heist was reopened once more. She called her mentor, retired Detective Harold Shaw, now living quietly outside Tallahassee. When she told him what she'd found, there was a long pause. Then his voice, rough and deliberate. "Lisa, ghosts don't move money. Someone's alive." They began reconstructing everything from the start. The dive shop, the receipts, the motel fire, even the weather reports from the night of the heist. Using AI reconstruction of the burned tape, they extracted fragments of Jason's final recordings. Archive. Tape number 5. Mark's not who he says he is. He changed his name before we ever left Florida. Said it was to keep us safe, but I think he had plans from the start. "If anything happens to me, look for the initials RH. He said they were fake, but I saw his old ID once." Reeves wasn't his name. It was something else. Grant leaned back in her chair, rewinding the audio. "RH," she muttered. "Reeves? Harper? Hall?" Shaw nodded slowly. "I'll dig through old alias records." The following week, a match appeared. Ryan Harper, a small-time smuggler who'd vanished from Tampa in 1995 after an assault charge. Photo comparison software confirmed it. It was Mark Reeves, or rather, Ryan Harper. He had faked his own death twice before the Clearwater job. The motel fire, once considered his end, now looked like another staged vanishing act. The melted lighter engraved JC might have been planted. Grant felt the ground shift beneath the case. "So Jason might have died for real," she said. "But Harper, he could still be out there." Shaw rubbed his temples. "And if he's moving that money now, he's doing it through the same channels he once robbed. That means someone in the cartel is helping him." The name that surfaced next chilled them both. Manuel Vargas Jr., the son of Miguel El Toro Vargas, the same man who'd been murdered on that yacht 20 years earlier. He was now a silent investor in multiple Miami shell companies, including a small import-export firm that had recently purchased luxury boats. Shaw exhaled. History repeats itself. They decided to set a trap. Grant posed undercover as a maritime accountant offering discreet offshore logistics. Weeks passed without contact. Then one morning, she received an encrypted message. "Meet at Pier 47. Midnight. Alone." The sender's signature. M.R. Shaw insisted on backup, but Grant refused. He won't talk if he smells a tail. That night, under the sodium orange glow of the harbor lights, Grant waited by the water, pretending to check her phone. The waves slapped against the dock pilings, each sound echoing the pulse in her chest. A figure approached, gray hair, thick beard, leather jacket. Mark Reeves, or Ryan Harper, older but unmistakable. "You've been looking for me," he said, his voice low, calm, as if greeting an old friend. "For a long time," Grant replied. "And you've been busy spending dead men's money." He smiled faintly. "You don't understand. I didn't steal from Vargas. I stole from his boss. Vargas was laundering his own boss's cash and planned to run with it. Jason didn't know. None of US did until it was too late." Grant studied his face, searching for truth. "You expect me to believe that?" He shrugged. "Believe what you want, but you'll never find the rest of it. The money wasn't lost, it was insurance." "Insurance for what?" she asked. "For silence." He turned to leave. "Wait," she said sharply. "Why start moving it again after all these years?" Harper stopped, the wind whipping his jacket. "Because they found me. Vargas is son. He wants his father's debt repaid, and I'm the last one left to pay it." Then he walked into the shadows, disappearing between rows of moored boats. The next morning, Shaw called her. "We traced Harper's alias to a warehouse in Hialeah. Surveillance shows crates marked as seafood exports, but customs data says they're empty." Grant and a team raided the site 2 nights later. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of brine and oil. The crates were indeed hollow, but hidden within the walls were bundles of cash vacuum-sealed in plastic, aged but intact. U.S. bills printed before 1996. $3 million, minus what had already circulated. Yet there was something else, too, a folder of old photographs. In one, Harper stood next to a young man, Manuel Vargas Jr., on a fishing dock in 2002. The caption on the back, written in neat handwriting, read, "Old debts never sink." It was evidence of a partnership, not vengeance. The idea hit Grant like a blow. He wasn't running for Vargas's son, she said quietly. He was working with him. Shaw frowned. To do what? To rewash the stolen money through cartel channels and make it look like a legitimate inheritance. They're both laundering the same cash the father died for. A week later, Harper's body was found floating near the same stretch of water where La Estrella Azul had gone down. His hands were bound with zip ties, his face unrecognizable from marine exposure, but a tattoo on his wrist confirmed his identity. The official report said drowning. Grant knew better. Someone had silenced him again. But who? The deeper she dug, the stranger it became. One night, she received a package at her apartment. No return address. Inside was an old cassette labeled JC Tape Number 7. The voice that played through her speakers was unmistakably Jason Cole's, but calmer than in his previous recordings. Archive, Tape Number 7. If you're hearing this, it means Mark's gone and I'm not far behind. We made a mistake bigger than we could handle. Vargas's son contacted me years ago, said he knew where the money was buried. Offered me a deal to split it. I said no. He said then it's mine anyway, because he already has Mark on his payroll. That's when I knew none of US would make it out clean. If you find a box, don't open it. Burn it. Grant rewound it, heart pounding. The box, she muttered. She scanned old photos of Jason's property, the same garage that had burned down. In one corner of a photo, barely visible under debris, was a metal box identical to the description in the tape. She contacted local records and discovered that the property had recently been purchased by a company called Azure Holdings LLC. The listed owner? Manuel Vargas Jr. She drove to Nevada with a federal warrant and a quiet dread. The desert air was hot and dry as she arrived at the site. The garage had been rebuilt, shiny and sterile, as if nothing had ever happened there. A caretaker let her in. "We rent it out for storage now," he said, handing her the keys. Inside, beneath the concrete floor, ground-penetrating radar revealed a void. When the agents broke through, they found the same metal box Jason had mentioned. Inside, there was no money, only a reel of undeveloped 35mm film. Back in the lab, Grant had it processed. The images that appeared were haunting. Photos taken during the night of the heist from a third angle. Neither Jason nor Mark's perspective. Someone else had been there, photographing the robbery from another boat. One frame captured everything. Jason aiming his gun, Mark grabbing the cash, and a man on a nearby dinghy holding a camera, his face clearly visible. It was Manuel Vargas Jr., at age 22. He hadn't been a victim's son seeking revenge. He'd been part of it from the start. Vargas Jr. had orchestrated the theft against his own father, using Jason and Mark as disposable pawns. The $3 million wasn't stolen, it was redirected. Shaw stared at the photos in disbelief. He killed his father to take over the cartel's assets, he said, and when his partners became liabilities, he erased them one by one. Grant nodded grimly. And now he's laundering that same money through legal companies, claiming it as legacy income. The revelation blew open a new investigation, connecting Vargas Jr. to a web of real estate, import-export fronts, and offshore accounts. But evidence was fragile. Everything tied back to the old heist, a crime long past the statute of limitations. They needed a modern crime to pin him with. Then came a tip from a dock worker in Miami. "He's moving something big tonight," the man said. Same pier, same hour. It was poetic, almost cruel. 20 years to the day since the night his father died. Grant coordinated with DEA units for a sting operation. Midnight, Pier 47. A cargo ship idled under false paperwork, waiting for inspection. The agents moved in silently. Then, from the shadows, a gunshot cracked the air. Chaos erupted, sirens shouting, flashlights slicing through darkness. Grant ducked behind a crate, scanning for movement. Through the smoke, she saw him, Vargas Jr., running toward a smaller boat, a duffel in hand. She chased, heart hammering. He turned, fired wildly. A bullet grazed her arm. She fired back, hitting his shoulder. The bag fell, spilling its contents. Bundles of old bills, water-stained and marked with 1996 serial numbers. Vargas stumbled, collapsed to the dock's edge. As agents swarmed, he muttered through bloodied lips, "You can't prove anything. It was never my money." Grant crouched beside him. "That's the problem, Manuel," she said quietly. "It was your father's." Weeks later, the case made national headlines. Cold case solved after 2 decades. The Clearwater Bay heist unmasked. Yet not everything was cleanly resolved. The recovered money was logged as evidence, but 2 of the offshore accounts remained active, untouched, untraceable. Someone else still had access. In her office, Grant reviewed the final reports. Then she noticed an incoming email from an anonymous sender. "You looked in the wrong place. The real stash isn't in the water, it's in the books." Attached was a single photo, an old motel sign, burned but legible. "Harper's Inn." The next day, she returned to Portland, to the ruins of Mark Reeves's motel. Among the charred remains, she found a hidden compartment beneath what used to be the manager's office. Inside were sealed bank ledgers showing transfers dating back to 1997. Money moving quietly through small accounts to fund property purchases across Florida and Nevada. And at the bottom, a single photograph, Jason and Mark smiling beside the yacht long before the heist. On the back, a handwritten note read, "You can bury the truth, but tides always bring it back." In the end, Grant closed the file, but not the story. She stood at Clearwater Bay on the anniversary of the murder, watching the water shimmer gold under the setting sun. Somewhere below lay the wreckage of La Estrella Azul, a grave of greed and betrayal. She dropped a small waterproof capsule into the sea. Inside it, a copy of Jason's final tape, labeled "The Truth Belongs Here." As she walked away, her phone buzzed. An international wire alert flagged under her name. $10,000 transferred to her account from an offshore entity marked Azure Holdings. She froze. It wasn't possible. The system traced the origin, encrypted untraceable, but signed with 3 letters. MVJ Shaw called moments later. "Lisa, you didn't touch that money, did you?" "No," she said slowly. "But someone wants me to know they're still out there." He sighed. "Be careful. Some stories don't end. They just wait." That night, as waves rolled against the shore, Grant opened her laptop. A new file appeared in her secure drive. No sender, no metadata. The file name read, La Estrella Azul, Part 2. She clicked it open, and the screen filled with grainy video footage, dated June 17, 1996. The same night, the same yacht. The camera panned to the deck, showing Jason and Mark in panic, the gunfire, the chaos. And then, unmistakably, Vargas Jr. standing in the corner, smiling, holding the camera. The feed ended abruptly with a splash. Somewhere between pixels and memory, the truth had surfaced again. Grant stared into the darkness of her office, the glow of the monitor flickering across her face. Outside, thunder rolled over the bay. She whispered, almost to herself, "How many ghosts did this water make?" The case was officially closed 3 months later, but files kept disappearing from the archive. Evidence boxes were reassigned, names redacted, and 2 investigators from the Financial Crimes Division resigned suddenly. The stolen $3 million had become a symbol, not just of greed, but of how time erodes justice until only stories remain. 10 years later, tourists still came to Clearwater, pointing out the spot where the yacht sank. Few knew the real story. Some said the divers still heard echoes at night, gunfire beneath the waves, a faint voice whispering through the current, "Don't open the box." As for Lisa Grant, she retired early, moved inland, far from the water. But every June, she received a postcard with no return address. Always the same handwriting, always the same message, "Old debts never sink." She never replied. She never needed to, because some truths belong to the deep. What do you think? Was justice truly served? Or did the sea just swallow another secret? Leave your thoughts in the comments below.